Australia's representative to NATO has joined military chiefs from about 20 countries for a meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing in England. We're joined now by our reporter Michelle Rimmer in London. Michelle, what more do we know about these closed-door talks?
Well, these talks took place at the UK's permanent joint facility just outside of London, and this is a highly secretive defence facility, and so no media was allowed in, and as a result we've had very little information come out so far. However, what we do know is that these were strategic talks. So over the past few days, representatives from countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, as well as Ukraine's allies in Europe, they expressed a political willingness to help Ukraine secure long-lasting peace and security were a peace deal to be established, some sort of long-term agreement to come into force. And this included the suggestion that perhaps some countries, including Australia, might provide troops to act as peacekeepers on the ground. So there's this political willingness that's been expressed, and this coalition of the willing was formed. And today was really about military experts putting their heads together and working out how this would work in practice, how many troops, who would supply them, other logistics like that, including who would enforce rules of engagement on the ground. And these are actually really quite complicated questions without a simple, clear answer. So it's unclear at this stage how much progress was made at these talks. However, that was the purpose of them. I spoke to a war expert and a former UK diplomat to Europe a little earlier and put these questions to him, and he said that while this coalition is a great display of unity, particularly in the face of a more Russia-friendly US, he said that quite simply the idea of putting these peacekeeping forces on the ground wouldn't work.
Putin is not going to allow NATO countries onto the soil of Ukraine. After all, if you remember back to the beginning of sort of 2022 and so, this is the thing he's always claimed to be his reason for going into Ukraine, that sort of NATO is creeping closer. So if NATO is actually in Ukraine, in a sense, how does he go to the Russian public and say this has all been a success?
Now, Michelle, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also addressed EU leaders at a separate summit in Brussels. So what was the focus of those talks?
So the focus for EU leaders at the moment really is about not only increasing its defences to maintain Ukraine's security, but to find itself in a position where it's able to protect itself in a world where it may not be able to rely on the US under President Donald Trump. And so that was again the focus of discussions around Ukraine today. In his address, Volodymyr Zelensky, he asked EU leaders for another $8 billion to buy more weapons. He also revealed that Ukrainian representatives will be heading to Saudi Arabia next week to take part in negotiations with the US around some sort of a ceasefire or peace deal. The Kremlin has already made it clear that it will also be sending representatives to Saudi Arabia next week for talks with US representatives. However, these talks will be separate. We won't be seeing Ukraine and Russia in the same room next week at least.